The year is 38 AD. The Roman Empire is an unstoppable force. Its legions cast long shadows from Britain to Egypt. Aqueducts, marvels of engineering, carry fresh water to marble palaces. And in the heart of it all, the Colosseum begins its bloody rise from the earth. But inside the imperial palace on Palatine Hill, a different kind of chaos is brewing. Picture this. A gilded chamber, heavy with the scent of incense and power. A 15-year-old girl stands alone. Her name is Valeria Messalina, and across from her is a 47-year-old man, a man with a limp, a stutter, a man whom the Roman elite openly mock. His name is Claudius. This marriage was not her choice. It was arranged by the mad Emperor Caligula himself just before his assassination. But when Claudius is unexpectedly thrust onto the throne in 41 AD, everything changes in a single breathtaking instant. Messalina transforms. Overnight, the teenage bride becomes the Empress of Rome, the most powerful woman in the ancient world. And here is the truth the history books often gloss over. Claudius wasn't just older. Ancient sources paint him as physically weak, politically naive, easily manipulated. The Senate saw a fool, but Messalina, she saw a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. Within 2 years, the 17-year-old empress isn't just by his side. She is pulling the strings. She controls key palace appointments. She identifies political rivals and eliminates them. The imperial bedroom for her becomes a throne room, a strategic command center. She is 17 years old, and she is just getting started. Now what you're about to hear, it sounds like something from a dark myth. Salacious propaganda designed to destroy a woman's reputation. And some of it surely is, but here is the critical, undeniable fact. Multiple independent Roman sources, Tacitus, Suetonius, Cassius Dio, and the unflinching naturalist Pliny the Elder, all documented the same core events. These weren't whispered rumors. These were accounts from Rome's most respected scholars. So when they all describe in chilling detail one impossible night in a Roman brothel, you have to ask yourself a terrifying question. What if it actually happened? Let me show you. The year is 44 AD. Somewhere in the Subura district, Rome's filthy, pulsating red light neighborhood, a woman wearing a cheap wig slips through a nondescript doorway. She gives the owner a false name, Lysiska, the she-wolf. But this is no common woman. This is Empress Messalina, and she isn't here for a secret tryst. She's here to compete. I know what you're thinking. This has to be a lie, right? A story invented by her enemies, except we have the source. Pliny the Elder, the same man who documented the eruption of Vesuvius with scientific rigor, recorded this event in his Natural History. He wasn't writing gossip. He was documenting what he believed to be a factual, witnessed event in Roman society. Here is what he wrote. Messalina challenged Rome's most famous prostitute, a woman named Scylla, to a single sordid contest. The rules were brutally simple. Who could service more men in a single unbroken 24-hour period? Scylla was a professional. This was her life, her craft. She worked efficiently, relentlessly through the night and into the pale dawn, but the Empress of Rome. She serviced 25 men, and according to Pliny, she won. She outlasted the professional. As dawn broke, the Empress, exhausted but victorious, returned to the palace. She washed away the night, and she calmly resumed her duties as the wife of the most powerful man on earth. Now, imagine you are a Roman citizen who saw this. You see a noble-looking woman enter that brothel. Later, a hushed, disbelieving rumor reaches you. That was the Empress. How does that information not burn through the city like wildfire? But here is the critical insight everyone misses. This wasn't about desire. This wasn't about lust. This was about power. In Roman society, a woman's sexuality was not her own. It was a currency controlled by men, by fathers, by husbands, by the law itself. But Messalina inverted that entire system. She seized that currency and turned it into a weapon. The brothel was her battlefield, and her victory was a declaration. Screamed into the Roman night, I can do whatever I want. I answer to no one. not the Senate, not the law, not even the emperor himself. Think of the psychological impact. Every senator, every patrician who heard this story had to confront a terrifying new reality. The Empress was not just powerful. She was utterly, dangerously unchecked. The brothel wasn't the climax of her story. It was a warning shot, a warm-up, because what she did next didn't just shock Rome. It nearly tore the entire empire in half. The year is 48 AD. Emperor Claudius leaves Rome. His mission, to oversee critical grain shipments at the port of Ostia. The moment his carriage disappears in a cloud of dust beyond the city gates, Messalina makes her move. This isn't another hidden affair. This is a public declaration of war. Her target is Gaius Silius, the most handsome man in Rome, and according to the historian Tacitus, the consul designate, meaning he is next in line for one of Rome's most powerful political offices. And he is terrified because Messalina doesn't ask for his hand. She commands it. She orchestrates a full public wedding ceremony, complete with witnesses, chanting priests, and a legally binding marriage contract in the heart of Rome. While she is still legally married to the absent emperor, Tacitus, in Book 11 of his Annals, prefaces this by saying, "I am well aware that it may seem like a fable that any human beings could have shown such recklessness." But he insists. He records only what he verified from reliable sources. Picture the scene. A wedding feast in Messalina's lavish gardens. Wine flows like water. Musicians play. Guests dance. And at the center of it all stands the Empress of Rome, draped in a bridal veil, pledging her vows to another man in front of dozens of Rome's elite. Put yourself in that crowd. You are witnessing the Empress commit high treason and the most scandalous adultery imaginable in broad daylight. What do you do? Applaud? Run? Stay silent, praying you aren't implicated when this house of cards inevitably falls. But why? Why would the most powerful woman in the world risk everything for a wedding? The answer is as simple as it is terrifying. This wasn't a romance. It was a coup. Roman law was explicit. Marriage transferred a woman's legal status to her husband. By marrying Silius, Messalina was attempting to transfer the imperial legitimacy to him. The plan was audacious. When Claudius returned, he would find himself legally displaced. Silius would claim the throne through his marriage to the Empress. Ancient sources suggest Silius himself was a pawn, coerced by a lethal mixture of seduction and threats. He knew that to refuse the Empress was to sign his own death warrant, and for one brief, impossible moment. Rome had two legitimate empresses, but in the shadows a man was watching, a man who had seen enough. His name was Narcissus, Claudius's most trusted freedman, and he knew that delivering this news would mean either saving the empire or plunging it into the bloodiest civil war since the assassination of Julius Caesar. The message was sent. The clock was ticking, and back at the palace, Messalina was already preparing for the final bloody act. While her public wedding was a spectacle of power, what Messalina did behind the palace's closed doors was even darker. This is how she maintained her iron grip. She would send out invitations, not to senators, but to their wives, the most aristocratic women in Rome. These weren't requests. They were commands, and the women who received them knew the unspoken truth. Refusal was not an option. Cassius Dio and Suetonius documented this, naming specific patrician families, the Valerii, the Cornelii, names straight from your history textbooks. Their wives were summoned to the palace for what Messalina called competitions, but these were no simple parties. They were displays of absolute dominance. Picture the scene. The torch-lit inner chambers of the palace. Rome's noble women, draped in fine silks, are forced to participate in sexual acts while Messalina watched. She was the judge, the audience, the architect of their shame. Some competed desperately for her favor. Others endured in silent, frozen horror. All of them understood the implicit threat. Refuse, and your husband's political career is over. Your family's name will be dragged through the mud of the Forum forever. Here's the brutal genius of her strategy. Every woman who participated became an accomplice. Every senator whose wife attended now carried a secret that could destroy his family's reputation. In Rome, a woman's virtue was directly tied to her husband's political honor. Messalina didn't just have dirt on these families. She had the nuclear option, and she used it. When a senator voted against her interests, suddenly devastating rumors would spread about his wife's behavior at the palace. When a rival questioned her authority, their family name was systematically destroyed. Suetonius even claimed she kept lists, written records of who attended and what they did. Whether these scrolls truly existed is debated, but the psychological impact was real. The threat of documentation was enough. Imagine you are a Roman senator. Your wife returns from the palace, pale and traumatized, refusing to speak. The next day, Messalina's agent approaches you with a request. What do? You comply because the alternative is your family's utter ruin. This is how a 20-year-old woman controlled men 3 times her age, men who commanded legions and governed provinces. She had weaponized their own pride, their own social codes against them. But power like this creates enemies who have nothing left to lose. And one man, the freedman Narcissus, had been watching it all, waiting for his moment. The wedding was the final straw. The trap was about to be sprung. The end came not with a grand battle, but with a quiet, brutal calculation. Messalina was in the gardens of Lucullus, her private sanctuary, when she heard the soldiers coming. She was with her mother, Lepida, who was desperately trying to devise a plan, any plan for survival. But Messalina knew. The game was over. In a final act of Roman dignity, she asked for a dagger. To fall on her own blade, to control her own end, this was the honorable way out for an aristocrat. The soldiers arrived, led by a tribune named Evadus. He stood before the Empress, the blade she requested in his hand. And in that moment he made a cold, deliberate decision. He denied her. Think about that. To deny a noble this final right was the ultimate humiliation. It was a message sent directly from Narcissus. You die not as an empress, but as a common criminal. The ancient sources describe the scene with chilling brevity. Her mother Lepida screaming, begging. Messalina herself frozen, unable to comprehend this final, absolute loss of control. The blade came down. Valeria Messalina, Empress of Rome, was dead at roughly 20 years old, but the true horror was just beginning. The Senate convened an emergency session and passed a decree of damnatio memoriae, the damnation of memory. It was Rome's ultimate punishment, erasure. Every statue of her was torn down. Every inscription bearing her name was meticulously chiseled away. Every painting was painted over, every coin melted down. Across the empire, workers climbed scaffolding, scraping Messalina from history itself. The message was clear. She never existed. And yet, here we are 2,000 years later, speaking her name. Why? Because those same senators who ordered her erased also commissioned the histories of Tacitus and Suetonius. They wanted her remembered not as a person, but as a monster, a warning to any woman who dared to seize power. Her children met even darker fates. Her son, Britannicus, the legitimate heir, died suddenly at age 13, poisoned, the sources say, by his stepbrother. Nero, her daughter Octavia, was forced to marry that same Nero, only to be executed by him years later. So the final, tragic question remains, was Messalina a monstrous predator who deserved her fate? Or was she a brilliant, ruthless woman, wielding the only weapons available to her in a system designed to keep her powerless? The truth is likely both. She did the things they said she did, but she was also described as a monster by the very men she terrified. Her story is a ghost in the historical record, an echo they tried to silence. A warning that, in the end, the most dangerous power isn't always held by the emperor on his throne. Sometimes it's held by the woman in the shadows, who decides she no longer wants to hide. What do you think? Monster or mastermind? Let me know in the comments. And if you're fascinated by history's darkest corners, you won't want to miss next week's story. We're diving into the emperor who made his horse a senator, and the real terrifying reason behind that infamous decision. Hit subscribe and I'll see you there.